All right, team, are we ready to start? Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is David Martinez. I am a director at Vitalist Health Foundation. Thank you all so much for joining this virtual information session we're hosting for the Justice Reinvestment Grants. We are today joined by a team of Vitalist Health Foundation team members and through our fiscal sponsorship program called the Technical Assistance Partnership of Arizona, or TAP-AZ. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. On the next slide, Sergio.
Buenos días a todos. Yo me llamo Sergio París, soy el director de comunicaciones aquí en Vitalist Health Foundation y solamente queríamos decirles que si necesitan ayuda en español, nos pueden mandar correos directamente a conversemos@vitalisthealth.org y también todos los documentos que presentemos hoy se los vamos a proveer. Entonces, también con un email después de esta sesión. Entonces, si algo se les olvida, se los mandaremos por email también.
Thank you, Sergio. We also have closed captioning available for those that need that services, in addition to ASL interpreters that are pinned to that will rotate throughout this session. All lines are muted upon entering this webinar, but please use the Q&A function of Zoom to ask questions throughout the session, and we'll have a Q&A portion of our information session. The slides and more information are at azjusticegrants.org, including this recording and all of the grant application materials for your reference. Over the next 2 hours, on the next slide, you'll see our agenda that we'll get through. We'll start with a round of welcome and introductions. I'll introduce the Justice Reinvestment Grant. And then my colleagues will take a deeper dive into the grant application and the attachments that you'll use as reference and exhibits for your application. We'll refer to some budget considerations and review those documents as well. And then, as I mentioned, we'll have an open Q&A session via the Q&A box where we'll begin to answer your questions as well. As I mentioned, my name is David Martinez. I direct our grants and civic health portfolio at Vitalist Health Foundation. We're also joined on the call by Alicia Kenny, who is the Health Equity Program Manager of Justice Reinvestment in the Office of Health Equity at the Arizona Department of Health Services. AZDHS is the state agent charged with facilitating this effort, and we've had a great partnership with her and the team at our State Department of Health Services as we begin to administer this funding opportunity. We're also joined by Vitalist COO and CFO Roy Pringle, our program manager for grants and partnership, Michelle Goodthunder. You just heard from Sergio Paris, our director of strategic communications, and Erica Foster, our program manager for learning and evaluation. You'll get to see their beautiful faces more a little bit further on in this information session. On the next slide, we'll begin to introduce the Justice Reinvestment Fund. For those of you who don't remember, in 2020, Arizona voters approved Proposition 207, which legalized recreational cannabis use for adults aged 21 and over, and it included excise taxes on that marijuana. And a portion of that, of those sales, is allocated to the Justice Reinvestment Fund, which aims to address substance use and mental health issues that often contribute to incarceration. The Vitalist and TAP-AZ was selected by the State Department of Health Services to be the fiscal agent and grants manager of the Justice Reinvestment Grants. And we have been working diligently with community partners over the past several months to stand up this grants program, have it be reflective of the community feedback that we've garnered through the state garnered through community feedback, and then our own listening and learning as well as our experience managing grants as a foundation as well. The Justice Reinvestment grants are broken up into 4 categories that you'll see here. These are the 4 categories that you'll determine if your programs and services fit within in order to qualify for the grants. So those 4 grant priorities are focused on substance use prevention and treatment, as you see in that first bullet point, public and behavioral health initiatives for substance use prevention, treatment, and early intervention services. The second grant category is revolving around restorative justice programs, including jail diversion, workforce development, and mentoring services for economically disadvantaged individuals and communities disproportionately affected by higher arrest and incarceration rates. The third grant category is focused on programs and services addressing the root causes of crime, including reducing drug-related arrests and lowering the prison population. And then the fourth and final grant category is around civil rights restoration, including expungement and developing technology and programs to restore those civil rights and expunging criminal records. So as you're discerning whether or not your programs and services fit with the Justice Reinvestment Grant, these are the 4 categories that you'll consider. And if you're doing work in one of these 4 categories, you should be well aligned with the grant opportunity. And then as we go further into the information session, you'll see the specific grant criteria. Throughout this information session, you might have questions about whether your particular program or service fits or qualifies within each of these 4. We're happy to have those conversations as a follow-up. Just go to azjusticegrants.org to find out more about all of the materials we've developed for the grant application, and feel free to email or call us with any specific questions so we can answer those individualized questions around program and service fit within the categories. So now I'll toss it over to my colleague, Michelle, who will begin to review the grant application.
Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. Let's talk about the grant application, what most of you are waiting for. So the first thing we're going to cover is the grant timeline. The portal for the grants is going to open May 1st. So this is when people can start applying for this grant, and it'll end. Actually, it's May 31st. It's a Saturday, but you're welcome to submit earlier than that, but it will close Saturday, May 31st at 5 p.m. And then in June, finalists will be selected, and we'll go into detail what that means. And then in July, we're going to do some in-person meetings. In August, we plan on awarding these funds. So we're hoping for a fairly quick turnaround time from when you apply for your grant and start receiving funds. There's some key grant considerations. Vitalis will be issuing approximately $10 million in awards. These periods are going to be 1 to 4 year award periods, and this is going to be up to the applicant to select what their timeline looks like. These are cost reimbursement grants, and then these grants have been divided up into 2 tiers. We're going to have a tier 1 of $50,000 to $500,000, and then tier 2 is over $500,000 up to $1 million for that entire award period. So that's either for that 1 year, if you select 1 year, or the entire 4 year, that total is up to $1 million. And this will be reflected when you request funding. Whatever request you make, the amount requested will be what tier you end up in. Very quickly, I'll go over this eligibility, and this is per the ARS about who's eligible. The main point is it's Arizona 501c3 public charity, or they're fiscally sponsored if they do not have their own 501c3. This is the long list of all those entities that fall under this category. You can review this later. And then submission options. There's 3 ways you can submit your application. The first being electronically through Vitalis Akoyago grant portal. And if you click that hyperlink later on, that will take you straight to the portal. You can also hand deliver to the Vitalis Health Foundation office if you want by the May 31st. or mail it to the Vitalist Health Foundation office, whatever best suits your needs. If hand-delivered or mailed to the office, the Vitalist staff will scan in the application and input it into the portal, so it'll go through the same exact review process, and all subsequent phases will be in the portal online if you were to be awarded. So the application itself is going to have a few attachments. We're going to have a narrative responses, and this is going to be up to 3,500 words for the entire narrative response. Or you can provide an optional video, and I'll have a link on how to upload a video unlisted to YouTube for this. But essentially, the video can be of the entire narrative response up to 10 minutes long, or you can just provide it as additional information up to 3 minutes. There's also going to be a budget workbook, and we have that template. And then optional attachments. If there's more information you want to provide, such as letters of support, work samples, resumes, MOUs, things of that sort, there'll be options for you to upload that. If you're not applying online, you would just bundle all this with either your hand deliver or your mailed and get that over to us with these filled out. Next, we are going to show you how to apply online, and those familiar with Vitalist Health Foundation, we are switching to a new system. So this is going to look a little bit different for those former partners. And this is going to be a quick video just to walk you through how to apply. And you can always reference this PowerPoint later if you need a step-by-step. Let me make sure. Let's see. Hopefully everyone can
You'll
hear.
navigate to the portal website. You'll see this page, and your first time going on this page, you'll want to create a new account. It'll ask you for your organization's name or EIN number to look it up in the IRS database. If I know my number, I'm going to enter that here and click search. You'll see that it's populating my organization, and I would select this. If I didn't know the information, I would skip and manually enter it and find this page where it asks for an organization's name, and then it'll ask for your information. If you were to look up your EIN number, this would have been grayed out, and it would just ask for your information to register your account. Once you enter the information, you'll click register. This will prompt the approved authorized user to approve your account. This is either myself or the lead at your organization. Once you have your account, you'll go back to this login screen and log into your account. It will navigate you to My Opportunities, where you'll see the Justice Reinvestment Grant. Click View. And this is where you would apply for this grant. You'll see the application due date, some high-level information. You can print a blank copy of this grant, which will be a PDF of all the questions asked. You'll have the apply button. I already started an application, so I'm going to go look at my submissions and open one I already started. You'll read through the first page, click next, and go through all the application questions. Again, since we provided information, this would have been pre-populated, and I would ask you to verify your organization's information. Once everything is completed and filled out, you can either submit if you're ready to submit by clicking the submit button. It'll tell you if you're missing any required responses. Or if you want to save for later, you can click save as a draft. And this will confirm it's saved. Or the system auto saves, so if you accidentally navigate off the page, you can come back and your place will be saved. You'll navigate to the
All right, so that was the how-to video for your reference later. Very easily. This is a quick look at the narrative response sections. It's broken into 4 sections. which will have associated scoring weight to them. Applicants will complete the responses based on one or more grant priority they are applying for. Applicants should refer to exhibits 1 through 3, which we'll cover later in this session. When they're completing this narrative response. As a reminder, the narrative response is up to 3,500 words or a 10-minute video. Right here is the evaluation rubric, and this is what our review team will be using to score your application. We are currently finalizing our review team. So that's going to look like one, we'll have a review team for each priority area, and each team will be comprised of at least 3 individuals with lived experience, program experience, and grant making or program evaluation experience. So we're trying to do our due diligence to make sure people that are reviewing your applications have intimate knowledge of what goes into this, and they are representative of the community. It's an open book, so this is also hyperlinked, and you can look at this while you're applying for your grant. Next, let's cover the award requirements. Once you become a finalist, you will be asked to conduct an in-person meeting. This is going to be a quick meeting with Vitalis staff, about 1 hour, to go over any follow-up questions that we may have, and discuss any challenges or opportunities for us to provide more assistance. And then there's going to be other things that go into the awarding. So you'll have to have certification of insurance, which we'll go over later in this info session. You'll conduct an orientation meeting. There's going to be monthly expenditure reports, and we have a hyperlink of that sample right there. We'll have quarterly progress reports and then annual reports, and this will include a satisfaction survey and very minimum demographic info of your participants. So with that, that concludes our grant application portion. We'll go into exhibits now, and then after that, we'll get into the budget stuff. So I'll hand it over to Erica Foster to walk us through the exhibits.
Thank you, Michelle. And so we'll go over 3 exhibits that were created by LaCroix and Milligan Associates. And so these were really created to understand which Arizona communities have been most impacted by arrest and incarceration and help identify priority geographies for the Justice Reinvestment Grant. And so the exhibits should really serve as a guide on what information and data applicants should prioritize in their narrative response for the grant application. And so today we'll just give a high-level overview here, and you can access the data and the reports in further detail in the exhibit reports posted on the grant website. And so in the next slide, we'll get into the geographic disparities from the landscape summary. And so most of the research is primarily broken down to the county level across the state. And so based on the research of arrest data from 2020, the highest per capita arrest rates for adults were in Gila, Coconino, Navajo, La Paz, and Pima counties. And so in the exhibit report, you'll be able to see the arrest rates for all counties, but we'll just highlight the top 5. I also wanted to just note that this data landscape focused on all arrests, and so not just drug-related arrests specifically. And so in the next slide, we'll look into the juvenile referrals. And so for juveniles, the highest court referral rates per capita were in Graham, La Paz, Gila, Yavapai, and Yuma counties. And so with the highest you can see being Graham with 431 per 10,000. And so another thing to point out is that when looking at the top counties for both per capita arrests and juvenile referrals, over 87% were rural or semi-rural, showing that geographic disparity. And next, we'll look at the prison admissions per 10,000, and this is using 2017 data. And so the top counties for prison admissions per capita were Graham, Gila, Greenlee, Cochise, and Yavapai, with Graham having an admission rate of 46.2. And so 100% of the highest admission rates were also rural or semi-rural. And so considering all of the data presented, arrest and incarceration rates for adults and juvenile Arizonans, including drug crimes, is highest in rural Arizona counties. And so LaCroix Milligan also looked at social vulnerabilities using the Social Vulnerability Index, also known as the SVI. And so just a quick background on the SVI. It uses variables from the US Census to identify communities that would be most vulnerable during a disaster. And so there's kind of 16 variables, but they can be lumped into 4 larger categories of socioeconomic status, housing characteristics, racial or ethnic minority status, and access to transportation. And so depending on these variables, it will determine how vulnerable a community is. And so LaCroix Milligan performed an analysis, back to the SVI. And so LaCroix and Milligan performed an analysis of the communities that had the highest SVI and highest crime rates. And so the top 5 most impacted counties were Yuma, Navajo, Graham, La Paz, and Pima. And so in the exhibit report, you can see kind of how the counties rank in crime and SVI separately, but for this presentation, we've included them together. And the next slide, please. And so when analyzing the data on racial and ethnic disparities, Black, Latino, and Native American populations exhibit the highest disparities across demographics. In Arizona, whether you're in a rural or urban area, Black folks are more likely to be arrested for marijuana offenses and to end up in prison for all offenses compared to their population size. Following them, Latino Arizonans have the highest number of arrests overall and make up the 2nd largest racial ethnic group in state prisons. And Native American Arizonans get arrested for drug crimes more often than white Arizonans, and they also tend to face the harshest sentences for drug crimes. And so on the right, you'll see the distribution of prison population in 2022. And so it shows that Latino folks make up the largest portion, Black folks are 3rd, followed by Native Americans. And so it's also important to note that Black people constitute less than 6% of the state population, according to census data, yet they represent 15% of the prison population. So and this is also, this disproportionate representation is also apparent in Latino and Native American populations as well. In their analysis, they also analyzed gender disparities. And so the number of women in Arizona jails and prisons has more than doubled in the past 20 years compared to a 19% growth rate nationwide. Additionally, the rate of female imprisonment in Arizona is approximately twice that of other states, and women are also in prison longer than the national average. And next slide. And BIPOC youth are also overrepresented in Arizona juvenile justice population. And so Black youth are 2.3 times more likely than white youth to be referred to juvenile corrections, and Latino youth are 50% more likely. And then Native American youth are 60% more likely to be screened for detention and detained. And so in the next exhibit, we'll get into the priority area maps. And so in the next slide, you'll see that a kind of summary of the mapping. And so LaCroix and Milligan analyzed data from the Department of Corrections to identify communities that are disproportionately impacted by incarceration. And so the communities identified were Black, Latino communities, and Native American communities. And they created a map of the top 25% of census tracts across the state with the highest portion of these populations to identify the priority areas. And so in the maps, you'll see the darker green on the map representing a greater impact. And so on this slide, for example, you'll see kind of the top right of the map is dark green, kind of where the Hopi and Navajo nations are. And so there's a higher portion of Native American residents. And then in the next slide, we'll just kind of give you some previews of what the maps could look like or will look like. And we won't go over every map in here because they do cover all of the counties, but just wanted to show a glimpse, and then you can see further in the attachments, or yes. And so you'll see here that kind of primarily the darker green, and then there's a little portion of lighter green. And so this is still considered a priority area, but just not as a high concentration of population as the darker green. And in the next slide, just another view of areas. So primarily it's counties, but in counties where they have a large metro area, they also zoom into the city. And so you'll see Pima County as a whole, and then zoom in closer, you'll see Tucson. And so for Tucson, because they have a little bit more of a bigger population and more census tracts, you'll see some of that darker green scattered around a bit. And so for our final exhibit, we'll go into the report for the community listening session. And so just a quick overview of their process. You'll see that from September to November of 2022, LaCroix and Milligan conducted 18 listening sessions with over 230 participants. And of these, over half had been arrested or incarcerated or knew someone who had. And so in their exhibit report, they go into detail of kind of these major cross-cutting themes, and then also give a highlight into some of the individual listening sessions, the themes that came out of those. And so today we'll just go over those cross-cutting themes. And so for the first 5, we have community education about stigma and discrimination, basic needs or access to resources, homelessness and access to affordable housing, access to behavioral health services and healthcare, and then reentry and jail diversion. And so some examples from the individual listening sessions include particularly reform of unfair treatment of trans individuals in the justice system, and implementing sensitivity training for police. Also culturally sensitive mental health services that decrease the stigma around seeking help. And then pre-release support and legal representation are some of those specific examples from these cross-cutting themes. The additional cross-cutting themes in the next slide include workforce development, youth development and early intervention, safety and safe spaces in neighborhoods, and then equity in the education system. And so some specific examples from those individual listening sessions include increased recreational activities and social clubs for youth, a focus on preventing substance use and promoting healthy behaviors and enhance mental health, and then also improve neighborhood sanitation to make community spaces safer and cleaner and just generally improve the hygiene and health of the neighborhood. And so that is the 3 exhibits that kind of give some of that data background, and now we'll go into the budget considerations.
Thank you very much, Erica. All right, so often one of the most complicated pieces of grant applications are the numbers, right? The budget pieces. So we're going to kind of go over a few general questions and also a little bit just a preview of what it's going to look like to complete the budget worksheet. Michelle, can you go to the next slide? So there will be, when you download the application attachments, one of those will be the budget worksheet. It is one workbook made up of 10 sheets. This includes guidelines. It includes the total price sheet, which you're seeing here. It includes a detail sheet, which you're seeing on the right for each year. So as part of the application process, you may choose a grant period anywhere from 1 year to 4 years. So if it's a 1-year grant, you would only fill out one of the sheets. If it's a 4-year grant, clearly you're going to fill out 4 worksheets. Each of the detailed worksheets, as I said, what the view is on the right, this extends much further down, but that will roll up into the summary that you see on the left. You'll be identifying your personnel, the ERE that goes with that personnel, any professional and outside services. So these would be contracts, travel, occupancy, other operating, any equipment purchases, and then also an indirect rate for indirect costs. And we'll get into more of the details as we go through. If you have questions on this, please email, call. We'll help complete these. A lot of the areas have calculations built in. So if you fill out what's in red, it will calculate what's in black, and then it will summarize everything for you and take it to the front sheets. The sheets are protected, but that is simply to help you with entry so you don't accidentally put stuff into fields that are calculated fields. However, it is not password protected. So if you know how to run Excel and you want to unprotect it for whatever reason, all you need to do is pick unprotect and you can do whatever you wish to do. I would encourage you, though, not to do that. As I said, this is really to help with entry, not to hinder entry. Yes. So can we go on to the next slide? There are insurance requirements, as you would expect. These are requirements set by the state. However, I will say, and I know for those of you who do a lot of grant writing, the state levels have increased over the years, and many groups don't have these current levels. Please apply, even if you don't currently have these levels. And then if you are awarded, we will work with all the groups to get to these levels. Keep in mind that the cost of insurance is a covered cost. So you can put that into your grant request and it will be reimbursed. Also, if you're having trouble securing these levels, talk to someone at Vitalist and we will assist you in getting these so that you do have coverage so that you will be compliant with the grant terms. Just general liability we're showing here, the types of insurance: general liability, business automobile liability, next slide, workers' comp, and then also employer's liability. So these are the required insurance. When you download the application documents, you'll see all of these in a lot of detail. There's a separate attachment just for insurance requirements, which you could send to your agent and say, what would this cost to get? And they'll be able to tell you, and then you can put those dollar amounts into the application. As I said, these are reimbursable under the terms of the grant. Next slide. Moving on, just some random budget considerations that always come up. We're going to try to address them right now, but feel free to ask more questions, or if there's more details, we can address those as we move on. Gift cards is a frequent topic that comes up. Just a couple limitations. Each gift card can be no more than $25. And you need to have a tracking system in place about who gets those gift cards, how much a total person gets in case we get over limits. If you get over, $600 or more for an individual person, you're required to issue a 1099, things like that. So there needs to be a system in place within your organization to track the distribution of gift cards. Lobbying, there's a restriction on the funding, so none of the fundings from the state can be used for lobbying. Travel, of course, there will be miles driven. So in order to be eligible for reimbursement for travel, you must maintain a mileage log, and that will have the date of travel, the beginning and end point of travel, the miles driven, which can be, just a Google search, a Google Maps from the beginning to end point is fine as proof of that. And then also the purpose of the travel. The current reimbursement rate from the state is 67 cents per mile. Moving on to purchases of equipment. So any capital equipment that is valued at $5,000 or more will require pre-approval. So please check with Vitalist and we'll check with DHS and to get that approval before any purchase of that size is made. Smaller purchases, but still for equipment. So probably things like laptop computers, maybe some other small pieces of IT equipment. Anything over $250 is technically an asset owned by the state. So it must receive an asset tag. So if you let us know that that purchase was made, we will contact DHS, we'll get that asset tag and provide it back to whoever purchased it so that can be applied to that asset. Next slide. Cost allocation. So as you are developing your budget, there will be expenses such as rent is a very simple one, where you can't attribute all of rent to this grant because you are doing many programs likely within your organization. But you want to obviously attribute some of the cost for rent to this work and to the work that's covered by the grant. So you just need to develop a methodology that you'll show and describe in your budget worksheet about how you decided how much of your rent expense goes to this grant. If it's very simple, if you were to have dedicated space, you could do a % of square footage. That'd be something very simple. But that may not be really the best way for you to make that allocation. It could be a % of FTEs working on the project. So let's say you have 10 FTEs, that could be 10 people, or 20 half-time people, but you have 10 FTEs working at your organization, and 2.5 FTEs are going to be dedicated to this program. So therefore, 1/4 of your work effort is dedicated to this grant program. In that case, you could have another methodology for distributing the cost of your rent to be 1/4, the 2.5 FTE working on the project divided by the 10 FTEs you have working for your organization. So as long as you develop a methodology that is reasonable for allocating your expenses across your programs or across your admin and program, that's acceptable. Just describe that and use that as the calculation for these types of costs. And the same type of cost allocation can be used for insurance, for instance, your current insurance. You're insured for your organization, but you can distribute part of that to the grant. And I can't think of other ones, but I'm sure there are lots of other common expenses that can be allocated to the grant. Also, the state is allowing up to 15% to be attributed to indirect costs. So I know there were a ton of questions in the chat that came up about indirect cost. So this is very simple to do within the budget worksheet. When you get down to the indirect costs, you just type in the indirect expense. It can be anything from 0 to 15%. And that will then take that percent of your direct program expenses and key it in as indirect. This is a really good way, by the way, to do expenses that are not allowable from state grants. Most common one is food. We all know that when we have meetings, we like to provide food. We also all know that it's not a reimbursable expense for state grants. So this is a good way to have funding available to pay for things like that. If you are doing indirect costs, just also be aware, and this is described in the budget guidelines, but if you're going to be doing indirect expense, you would not put in things in your operating expenses like maybe paper or copies or things that are your general office supplies. They would be covered through this indirect cost. Moving on to employees. As you saw on that first worksheet on the first page, you have to identify all the personnel working on this grant. Over 1 or certainly by 4 years, you will likely have changes in that personnel. So those need to be reported within 30 days. And we actually, on the expenditure reports that we're going to show later on those expenditure reports that are due monthly, there is an actual section where you can just identify the changes in your personnel. And we want to make that very simple. Budget reallocations also come up as a question very often. You may reallocate 10% between budget categories without permission. So if you're over in one budget category, under in another budget category, that's okay as long as those overages and underages are 10% or less of the total annual budget. If it's more than that, you need to have a request in writing about the budget change, submit that, and then you'll get a revised budget. And all things must also fit within the State of Arizona Accounting Manual. So they go into great detail about what are allowable expenses and what are not allowable expenses. So if there are detailed questions, you can always go to that manual, and that is the definitive source of what is allowable for state funds. Next slide. Okay, so I've already seen at least a dozen questions in the chat regarding cost reimbursement grants. And this is a cost reimbursement grant. However, one of the benefits of partnering with Vitalis Health Foundation is that although the state cannot put out funds ahead of time before they are expended, we have the ability to do that. So what we have, the way this is going to work are for organizations that do need advanced funding. They need working capital to run their program, and they can't wait for that cost reimbursement. I mean, we all have been involved in cost reimbursement grants. We know that can go 60, 90, or even more days before we receive funds back after we expend them. That's very difficult for smaller organizations, even some mid-sized organizations. So for smaller organizations or mid-sized that need cash advances, they can request that from Vitalist. We have approval from our board that we will advance 45 days worth of funds. So that will give time. So we'll take the entire budget, the annual budget, divide that by 12 to get the monthly, multiply by 1.5. So roughly 1.5 months worth of expenses, 45 days. We will provide that money before the funds are expended. As we talked about, there's a monthly expenditure report due. So as the month ends, as we moved into the next month, we'll collect all of the receipts, all of the backup that goes into one of those expenditure reports, and we will review those. And then we will immediately turn around and advance funds for all of the expended funds for the prior month. So hopefully those expenditure reports can be submitted within 15 days after the end of the month. And then we will immediately turn around and reimburse those funds, so you are always ahead of the funds being spent. We have the ability to do EFTs. As a matter of fact, we encourage that. So you won't be waiting for a check. As long as you provide banking information, those funds will be electronically transferred into your bank account as soon as we receive and approve the expenditure report. As a caveat, advanced funds may only be used for allowable expenses, right? So they must fit within the grant terms. They must be allowable expenses through the state of Arizona. So any use of those funds for non-allowable expenses obviously must be repaid immediately. And finally, next slide. As we saw in the eligibility slide, you must be an Arizona 501c3 to be eligible for these grants. But if you are not, or if you require a fiscal sponsor for any reason, fiscal sponsors are eligible to apply for the grant funding. So if you have a fiscal sponsor, wonderful, that fiscal sponsor will do the application. If you do not, we also have presumptive approval through Technical Assistance Partnership of Arizona, or TAP-AZ. So for those of you who don't know, TAP-AZ is a large fiscal sponsor in the state of Arizona that has a close relationship with Vitalist. So when you are filling out the grant application, if you require a fiscal sponsor but don't have one, there's a checkbox that say, I would like TAP-AZ to be my fiscal sponsor. Once you pick that, it will allow you to continue in the application process. And then that will be sent to TAP-AZ, who can review the work. And if you are awarded the grant, so if it goes through the whole process and you are awarded, then that presumptive approval would be reviewed, likely turned into a final approval. A couple things that go along with that: there is a 4% fee to be the fiscal sponsor. Normally that rate is 7%, but it's being reduced to 4% for these grants. And that 4% is also an eligible expense and can come out of the indirect expense, that 15% indirect expense category. So it can also be covered by the grant funds. Okay, and as I said, so just select, if you need one and don't have one, select TAP-AZ during the application process if you require a fiscal sponsor. And I think that leads us to the end of our conversation and opens up for Q&A. I know people have been diligently working off of the question and answer queue. If you have them, please continue adding. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Michelle or David to lead us out.
Yeah, I can lead some Q&A or David, I see you pop back on. Hi. One of us can lead through. I did want to address one of the questions I didn't have a chance to respond to, is attachment limit size. This is often an issue when you're applying online, which is true. Our portal, luckily, is pretty large. It's about 5 megabytes per attachment, which is a lot. But if you run into any issues, feel free to email that email address, the jrg vitalshealth.org, and we'll get that situated for you. Also, the video submission is going to be a link and not an upload, so that's going to help with that limit size as well.
Great, thank you so much, Michelle. We'll start. We've been answering those that we can via the Q&A chat box, but for those that have questions, continue to please use that Zoom function. We will answer some of these live that are more budget related. And this might be a question that our colleague Alicia might be able to answer, unless Roy, you have the answer. But just to clarify, the U of A Foundation, which is an Arizona 501c3, is not eligible. And this was a follow-up clarification question noting that government institutions, including universities, are not eligible to apply for the Justice Reinvestment Grant. But as a 501c3 is a foundation for a university allowed.
I don't have a definitive answer, but I'm going to assume that if they are an Arizona 501c3, the
Elise,
foundation.
you're unmuted, so she might have an answer. Yeah.
Oh, okay, great.
You can finish, Roy, because it may have been similar to what I was going to say.
I'm going to say yes.
I would concur, and I can double check internally with ADHS, but I would imagine if you have the 501c3 status, you are eligible.
Okay. Thank you, Alicia and Roy. So we will get greater clarification on if foundations for universities or colleges as 501c3s can be the lead applicant. We will be capturing these questions and providing frequently asked questions FAQ document on azjusticogrants.org. Roy, regarding capital purchases, approval of the budget doesn't also approve those itemized purchases. We need to also get approval from the state before/at the time of purchase.
If they are over $5,000 and identified in the budget during the application process, I believe that would be considered the approval because it will be reviewed.
Okay, thank you, Roy. Roy, can you place a percentage of finance team under personnel, or must that be under indirect?
I would recommend placing your administrative costs, if they're not directly related to the program, under indirect.
Thank you. Roy, if food is needed for culinary training, could that be covered under indirect cost, or would that actually fit under program expenses?
For that one, I mean, I may have to get clarification from the state, but I would consider for that as, if we mean the food for prep for as a supply into the work, I would not consider that food. It's not meeting food. It's not feeding participants. It's part of your program. So I would say that qualifies as a supply to your work.
Thank you. Roy, is braided funding allowable, i.e. clinician being able to build a caseload, moving into sustainability for that position?
I guess I don't fully understand the question. Braided funding.
I think like the billing as an insurance billing, and then they would braid the funding to be able to sustain that position over the longer term.
Sure, a person can't be funded for the same work, obviously, right? So they can't receive reimbursement from the state funding for funding that they're also billing. So you can't double dip. But if you're talking about keeping a clinician on and you're paying a part of their time that is not billable, that could certainly be, if they're providing services for the program, I don't see why that couldn't be an eligible expense.
Thank you. If we have already received 3 years of grant from Justice Reinvestment, are we only eligible to potentially receive 2? Oop, I got jumped, sorry. Our grant says something to the effect of a max of 5 years. So if we apply, should we only try for 2?
And the answer to that is no. You may apply. This is a separate grant opportunity. They will be independent. As part of the grant application, there is a question about any current justice reinvestment grant that you're operating, just so that there's clarification about how they fit together. Is this an extension of the work? Does it build on the work in addition to the work? Whatever that looks like. But there is nothing that precludes the two together, and they're independent.
I would also add to that, this Justice Reinvestment Grant is state funding separate from Justice Reinvestment funding that is dispersed directly to the counties. And each county has their own mechanisms for dispersing their Justice Reinvestment Fund portions. So for instance, here in Maricopa County, the county has been working with Just Communities Arizona to disperse the Justice Reinvestment Grants. So very similarly, you would be able to apply separately for this state-funded Justice Reinvestment Grant, so long as it's not for the same effort or double counting in that sense. And you'll have the ability, as Rory mentioned, in the budget to clarify that. Is subcontracting for professional evaluation services allowed in the budget? Roy?
Yes.
Do state agencies require a fiscal sponsor?
Yes. State agencies are not eligible to apply. They would require either a fiscal sponsor or they need to partner with a 501c3.
To be the lead applicant. Okay. What was the website for the Arizona State Allowable Expenses Manual? We can follow up with that link and put it in the typed answer, and it'll be on azjusticegrants.org as well. When you add federal prison stats to the state, Native Americans are substantially overrepresented in the prison system because of offenses committed on reservations, which are under federal jurisdiction. Correct. The exhibit 1 from in the materials does note the data limitation that the incarceration and arrest rates do not include federal arrests and incarcerations. What are the grant ranges? And are there minimum numbers to be served? There are no minimum numbers to be served, and the grant ranges were outlined in the slide deck, which is available at azjusticegrants.org. And I can see
basically there were 2 tiers. Tier 1 is anything a request for 50,000 up to 500,000. And just as a matter of expectation, we're expecting about 7 million of the 10 million to be granted within that category. And then anything between 500,000 and $1 million is tier 2. And we're expecting about 3 million of the 5 million to be allocated in that tier.
Thank you, Roy. Is the 4% for the fiscal sponsor instead of 7% available to all applicants, or just those who sign up for the TAP AZ to become their fiscal sponsor?
It's only, if you have your own fiscal sponsor, it's whatever your terms are with them, and you'd have to fit those dollars into your budget. The 4% is exclusively if TAP AZ is your fiscal sponsor for the grant.
So if you're an existing TAP AZ project, would that be the 7% or the 4%?
4% for this grant, for these grant dollars.
Got it. Thank you. If the funds will be used to add personnel, do we indicate TBD for the name?
Yes, and then identify that person's name after they're hired.
Got it. Are these multi-year grants? If so, how many? We do have 2-tiered, as Roy explained, grants. You can apply for between 1 and 4 years. Are allowable to contract evaluation services for the grant? Yes.
Yes.
Will this recording be available to watch again later? Yes, it'll be posted to azjusticegrants.org. Is the $10 million available for this program the total amount that will be available over 5 years, or will there be $10 million per year for 5 years? There's $10 million total for 4 years. Where do we access the portal link for the grant application? The portal link will go live on May 1st and will be posted to azjusticegrants.org.
It is also listed in the instruction document that's available for download. But you're right, will not be live until May 1st.
If a certain program previously funded by this grant is part of a grant application for a separate organization applying this year, would they still be eligible to apply to fund the same program, though that separate org this time?
Monday of a certain.
I think this might be a clarification in the budget.
If the question is, can I apply for the same work within 2 grants? You can't double dip, so they can't both be funded. And that would show up, I mean, I guess that would come up as the finalist. If both grants made it through to the finalist review, we would see that. So if it's different work for different grants in different applications, yes. If you're a member of a coalition or a partnership of several partnerships that are applying, which is entirely possible, that's fine, as long as the work obviously is only paid once.
Great. And if you need further clarification on that specific instance, please visit azjusticegrants.org and feel free to email jrg@vitalisthealth.org to schedule a time to chat and get your specific question answered. That's jrg@vitalisthealth.org. Our diversion program is in the county attorney's office. Are we eligible to apply? Government institutions are not eligible to apply. A lead applicant must be an Arizona 501c3 or fiscally sponsored entity. Does my fiscal sponsor need to be the lead applicant when filling out the application? Yes.
No. So I think Michelle should talk. So how it works in the application system. You want to talk about that, Michelle?
Yeah.
Sure.
So when you're completing your application, you will submit all your organization information. If you do not have an EIN number, there'll be a prompt of like what to input. And then later down the application, there'll be a question asking if you're using a fiscal sponsor. You can either say, no, I'm a 501c3. Yes, TAP-AZ is currently my fiscal sponsor. Yes, TAP-AZ will become my fiscal sponsor if approved, or yes, and it's other, and it'll ask for, if it's anyone other than TAP-AZ, there'll be a section for you to complete your fiscal sponsor's information. One caveat I want to mention is if you're using a fiscal sponsor other than TAP-AZ, we are asking for letters of support from your fiscal sponsor, just confirming that they are your organization's fiscal sponsor.
Great. Sorry about that initial confusion. Thanks for the clarification. Would capacity building costs for sustainability be an allowable expense?
I'm not doing the evaluation, so I can't answer for sure. I would caution, I guess, about that, since it's not part of the program, not going directly to as a service program, not going as part of that service. But I can't say no. I'm not on the evaluation team.
And I would just add to that the scoring rubric that our grant and review teams are using to review all of the proposals is posted at azjusticegrants.org. I know on the slide it was very small print, but you can download that document and zoom into it as it's linked to the website. This is an open book test. So long as your application aligns and answers those questions as strongly as possible, the stronger the application will be. My association has 501c3 status. Is that status eligible? I believe it is not. You must be an Arizona 501c3 or fiscally sponsored organization. Are state agencies eligible to apply with a fiscal sponsor? Yes, the fiscal sponsorship is allowed. Who is responsible for reviewing the grants and selecting the grantees? How can the public participate? We are developing the grant review teams now. We hope to have at least 3 members of the community for each of the 4 grant types, likely more, depending on how many applications we get, and we have great interest. If you're interested in exploring how you or any other person can participate, feel free to reach out directly to me, or if you can send an email to jrg@vitalisthealth.org, we can facilitate that exploration. So just direct folks to azjusticegrants.org and email jrg@vitalisthealth.org to explore. Where would I find the information on the question regarding U of A Foundation after it has been confirmed? We are drafting a frequently asked questions or FAQ document, and as soon as we get that completed sometime this week, as soon as possible, with formal confirmation from the state, we will get it posted to azjusticegrants.org. For more context regarding the food budgets category, food would be used in culinary training and the meals created would be served to Arizona residents. I think that so long as the food is for the programmatic work, you would put it in the program expense, not indirect, as food for meetings or anything like that. What parameters are being put in place to ensure the grants awarded are going to go to communities and causes, it was intended for, example, not supporting fentanyl or alcohol recovery programs. The Black and African American communities were wholly omitted from the grant awards last cycle. You can review the scoring rubric specifically, which we have been really intentional with outlining the target areas, populations, and communities, including weighting those scores to better reflect that based on community feedback. Roy, do you have anything else to add on that point?
No, just for clarification though, there is nothing wrong with supporting fentanyl and alcohol recovery programs. The issue is the target population. So the target population is going to be heavily weighted, based on those exhibits, to areas and demographic populations that were disproportionately affected by marijuana-related arrest and incarceration. The services provided to those individuals in those communities can be broad, right? It's substance use prevention, treatment, early intervention services. So I just want to make sure we're clarifying that, or differentiating between the target populations and the services provided.
Right. And I'll also add the grant priority areas are drafted specifically from Proposition 207 as passed by Arizona voters and now enshrined in Arizona state law. Do we need to pick just one priority when applying, or can we apply under multiple priorities? Example, using restorative justice, priority 2, to provide substance use prevention, and early intervention, priority 1. You may apply for multiple categories.
Well, they're required to pick the primary as part of the application process. So pick the primary. It can relate to more than one category. What selecting is going to do, the primary scope of the work, allows us, when we're assigning these to teams, to pick team members, review team members who have lived experience in those areas.
I have to jump off to another meeting. So Michelle, can you continue facilitating the live Q&A, please?
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, David. So which category would housing fall under? A nonprofit housing program for reentry for individuals in recovery. This is only housing. This nonprofit is not a recovery center. This nonprofit does not bill any insurance, simply affordable housing licensed through DHS.
I suppose it would depend on how they want to define the outcomes of the program. There's not a wrong category to assign yourself to. So it depends on how you write up your program narrative, right? So what are you doing and what are the expected outcomes? As long as you're addressing one of the priority areas, that's where you should put it.
Yeah. The next one is this this Justice Reinvestment Grant is fundable for 5 years, correct? And that is incorrect. It is 1 to 4 years. So up to 4 years, you can pick your personalized time frame. Would collaborative grant applications be accepted to address multiple priority areas?
We encourage collaboration, so of course, but you'll still have to pick the primary area of the work as part of the application process.
Right, the next one, could you expand on different amounts of funding? I understand there are 2 categories of funding with different amounts.
So you don't even have to pick, you will be either in tier 1 or tier 2 based on the budget you put in. So, and this is really to address an issue of, some large organizations apply and some small organizations apply. And we don't want some of the smaller organizations competing against some of the very large nonprofits in the state. So you may choose whatever your budget looks like and whatever your time frame. When they are evaluated, they're going to go into the tier 1, which is the $50,000 to $500,000 requests, or tier 2, the over $500,000 but up to $1 million requests. And then we have some expectations around what those total grant dollars will be in each of the buckets. And right now, the expected amounts are about $7 million for tier 1 and $3 million for tier 2.
Next, will this conflict with the Access Targeted Investment Program 2.0?
I am unfamiliar with it, so I cannot answer the question.
Yeah.
We can set that aside and we'll try to address that. Or if you have more information, please email us at the address that's in the chat.
Yep. Okay. Let's see. If the term of this grant round is 1 to 4 years, will the next round of state justice reinvestment funding be offered 4 years from now?
Hi, this is Alicia. I can answer that one.
Thank you.
No, ADHS receives funding from the state treasurer's office twice a year for these funds. So the intent is to put out the funds on an annual basis. However, I cannot predict how we will do that next year, whether it will be overseen by ADHS, Vitalist, or another fiscal agent.
What I can say is, so Vitalist has a contract with the state for this round of funding only. So we can only speak to this 10 million and how we'll be managing it. There is obviously funds that are accruing through the excise tax, but how ADHS chooses to distribute those and when is up to ADHS.
Awards are made in August. What is the time frame to use? I'm wondering if this would be co-occurring with a current grant. So if we awarded August, when do they have to use the funds by?
It is 1 to 4 years. It would be up to the applicant how they apply.
Are there audit requirements for applicants?
So there's no requirement to submit an audit or really any financials. There will be ongoing communication between Vitalist and the grantees to go over the expenditures to make sure they're compliant with the grant. But beyond that, there's no requirement for financials as part of the application process.
Are stipends for youth participants permissible, and would they be considered indirect costs?
I don't know if Alicia knows the answer to that, or if we have to do a little check on that. Anything can be an indirect cost, but it may be an eligible expense. We'd have to get confirmation.
I would think if it's a stipend, you would have to put it down as, your like contractor or additional expenses that aren't personnel. Because there are times when we understand that you may want to provide a stipend for participant involvement. I can double check on that one.
We'll verify and post that online. Thank you. Can the
I think
funding,
just one more thing on that.
Yes.
I think it would go under professional and outside services. So these are non-personnel expenses, but they are to companies or individuals as part of the program or as part of the work.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Can the funding be utilized for parks and recreation related infrastructure?
I'm guessing that would be over $5,000, so it'd require pre-authorization, but I don't see why it couldn't be an eligible expense.
Skip that one. Let's see. Based on the exhibits, are the target areas the 5 counties discussed? If so, can an agency in Maricopa include Maricopa in addition to the counties targeted in the exhibits?
So
Yes.
absolutely. So the funding can go to any county. We just want to express that there will be, as part of the rubric, a focus on the exhibits, right? And those exhibits identify areas that both geographic areas and demographic populations that were disproportionately affected by marijuana-related arrests and incarcerations. That is 32 points, I believe, within the scoring rubric. So it will be weighted, but that does not mean that there will not be funding in other areas that are not identified within those exhibits.
Thank you. What is the start date for funded projects?
We anticipate awards to be made around August 1st.
Can a community college use its foundation, a 501c3, to apply, although the community college will do the work?
Yes.
What kinds of metrics will be required in reporting?
So as part of the visit, if you are a finalist, a member or two from Vitalist team will come out to visit to get any last minute questions answered, to see how we can partner to address any concerns. And also as part of that visit, we'll be making or developing what those metrics look like. These are fairly simple just to keep you on track. So you will be involved in making your own metrics. And let's say you have certain milestones, such as hiring someone in 3 months. Well, that can be a milestone. If it is, we expect to host 2 conferences a year, one of the metrics will be, did you host your conference? So these will be just to make sure that you are meeting your own program description.
Next question, can there be site visit before applying? I'm not sure.
A site visit from, I don't know if that means from us to them. That typically the only groups that are going to have a meeting with a member from in-person meeting from a member from Vitalist would be if they make it through and become a finalist. We don't want to burden every nonprofit that's applying with setting aside time and going out and meeting. So only those that are finalists will have to, schedule that time.
Hopefully that answers that question. If that person wants to clarify, you're welcome to email us at the jrg@vitalishealth.org. The next question, so we are an Arizona C Corp or serves thousands of justice involved youth across the state. Should we have our nonprofit partner housed in Ohio, who is a 501c, submit as lead and us as a subcontractor?
Unfortunately, neither will work because the requirement is an Arizona 501c3. So I would recommend either finding a partner who is a 501c3 to be the lead applicant, an Arizona 501c3, or use a fiscal sponsorship option.
Thank you. The next question, I'm trying to summarize. It's regarding our tiered amounts, and I think you already covered this, is they're wondering, you know, if would they be taking a risk to apply for 4 years instead of 2 because we'd be in the running for a lower percentage of funds?
So I'm going to leave that up to the applicants. I mean, they can only submit one application. They can choose how they want to compete. But that would be a decision made by the applicant.
Thank you. And then let's see, the next one, in the terms and conditions, it says grantees will provide a copy of all printed and broadcast media or any other education materials developed using funds awarded under this grant for approval. Media and or printed educational, and it just keeps going about the logo. Just clarifying, the educational material that may be created at the same time or time as this grant and used in this grant, but is from other funding sources, does not fall under this, correct?
Correct.
So yes, if it's being funded by another source and doesn't apply for that, or isn't applicable to that term.
Right.
Would a program to provide legal assistance to low-income misdemeanors abate or mitigate fines and fees after sentencings who were not represented in the underlying misdemeanor offense fall within the expungement category or otherwise?
I don't know, Alicia. So expungement for non-marijuana related offenses.
So in Arizona, the only offenses that can be expunged are marijuana related. I would encourage the organization to apply, but because it sounds like the work you're doing is is an eligible service, but it probably would fit better in a different category than the 4th category, because that's specific to expungement services.
Clarifies that, thank you. Next one is for the newer organizations are greener. Can you explain what fiscal sponsorship is, Roy? It's a high level.
Sure. So fiscal sponsorship allows either small nonprofits or even groups that are considering becoming a nonprofit to come together, work as a program under their fiscal sponsor. And that fiscal sponsor then provides the financial backbone for that group or that organization. They do all of the check writing. They're responsible for, the taxes. They do take care of the insurance requirements. So all of the organizational structure pieces are taken care of by the fiscal sponsor. The individuals doing the work can really focus on their program, and then really help them develop their fundraising capacity. And then eventually they can grow out of the fiscal sponsor, becoming their own standalone 501c3 or whatever their future holds. But it allows them that ability to grow, and it also allows them to apply for grants because they have the 501c3 of their fiscal sponsor.
Thank you. I think that answers the following question. We have a few very specific questions if their program would qualify.
So the short answer, is yes. If you are writing your narrative and it fits within one of the 4 priority areas, please apply. Okay, we are not part of the evaluation team. It's going to be evaluated based on that rubric. The review teams are going to look to see if it fits within one of the 4 priority areas. They're going to look at the exhibits to examine the populations and weight the areas and demographic populations that are being served. But if you believe that your work falls within one of those 4 priority areas, the short answer is yes, please apply.
Would applicants be notified of the grant award status at the end of selection period prior to award period? I would say no. You'll be notified in August whether you're awarded or not. I don't think we'll have any notifications before that. Let's see. Are the funding tiers per year, or the tiers reflect the total award caps for grant periods up to 4 years?
Per year. The
So,
funding tiers are total award.
yep. So it's a cap of $1 million total, whether you do that 1 year or 4 years. The next question. The current award is 10 million, is less than last round of 18 million. Can you explain the reason for this reduction?
This is Alicia with ADHS. I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this. So the first round that was put out included previous year deposits by the state treasury department with these funds. So that's why it was greater.
Thank you. Next question. If they currently have a Justice Reinvestment grant, and then if they get awarded this one as well, does it extend their time or does it co-occur?
They would co-occur. So this is a separate round, but they would be asked to specify, these additional funds, are they in addition, so are they adding to the program? Will they be supplementing it if the current one is terminating? So if it's terminating soon, I would recommend making the application. You could say, I won't be expending funds until maybe 3 months in, and you can make that clear as part of your budget narrative. If your current one is going on for another year, then I would actually recommend not applying this round and wait for next round, if you don't need the funds for additional programming.
To confirm, all funds are distributed on a reimbursement basis.
So as we talked about, this is a reimbursement grant, so they are after the fact, unless you use the cash advance facility that Vitalis is providing, where they will provide up to 45 days of expected expenditures in advance.
Next one. Is there an age frame allowed for participants? Example, 12 through 17, 18 and older, etc. I don't think there is.
No.
And then let's see. Community colleges can use their 501c3 foundations, but there's a question whether universities can also use their 501c3.
No, they will be the same, and we'll get clarification on that. I believe the answer will be yes for both, and we'll put that on our webpage, but I don't see why they would not qualify both through their 501c3s.
We only have a few more questions, so thank you. Will this grant fund existing programs or only new expanded programs?
Either.
Mm-hmm. We can't have MC Juvenile Probation Department submit it or the ASU Foundation, although I think you said you were looking into, That goes into the previous.
Same question.
Yep. Let's see. Just confirming that an agency can apply as lead applicant on only one application regardless of tier.
Correct.
Can you please show the 4 priority slide again? I can get to that one, yes. Yeah. Real quick. Way at the front. Okay, here we are. There's the grant priorities for reference as we talk through the few more questions. Will supplies such as wound care items, water bottles, sleeping bags be allowed?
If they're part of the program, absolutely.
I think we already answered this. Can we apply for more than one program, all irrelated and serving the same demographic in a single application? If not, can we submit more than one application? Which goes back to, you will have to pick a primary priority area, but you can be addressing multiple priority areas.
I think the question more, Michelle, is if we're the same organization and we want to apply for multiple different scopes of work. And I don't know that our system is going to allow the same applicant to apply multiple times. And I think it'd be maybe better to wrap it up into one application, you know, asking for funding for all of the work that you're trying to accomplish with the funds.
Yeah. And then last question, is the time zone of the portal closing in AZ Mountain or Pacific?
It's Arizona time. We set it to Arizona time.
Yes, it's Arizona time. So wherever we're landing right now.
So it's specified in the instructions to applicants. So May 31st, 5 p.m. Arizona time, the portal will close.
Thank you. Oh, then one last follow-up to what you said. Can you choose multiple categories of the 4 listed? No, you'll pick just one category, which is going to be your primary, but you can address multiple within your narrative response in your application. And I believe we got through all the questions. That's good. So that concludes our information session. If anyone has any follow-up questions, you're welcome to email jrg@vitalshealth.org. I will be sending a follow-up email to everyone registered with a link to this presentation recording and a website and additional information for reference. Thank you everyone for joining us.